let's start with Israel. In Israel, there's actually two debates going on. The first debate, which is a very substantial debate, has very little to do with the Palestinians. And it began a year before October 2023, when Israel's current Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, was elected to office, formed an extreme right wing government, and put forward a legislative agenda that would have increasingly concentrated executive, legislative, and judicial powers in the hands of the government and severely weakened the role of the Israeli judiciary. And that's, you may remember that for almost a year, there were growing demonstrations on a weekly basis within Israel. Now you have additional demonstrations which are opposing the government for not implementing the January ceasefire agreement because you have many Israelis who believe that it is only through an agreement that Israel will be able to retrieve its captives from the Gaza Strip alive. Against them, you have many Israelis who believe that Israel should intensify the war because the objectives of obliterating Hamas are more important than saving the lives of the captives. So you have these kind of um, different polarizations on the basis of different issues, but there's actually very little opposition to what Israel is doing to the Palestinians because of what it is doing to the Palestinians. So the opposition is either against Netanyahu personally or about what is perceived to be the government's failure to do enough to bring back the Israeli hostages, rather than because of what's being done to the Palestinians. Within the United States, I think it's clear, there has been more protest, more debate, more opposition, more discussion of this issue than I ever imagined I would see in my lifetime. You've had all these encampments at campuses and so on, and this is all the more telling because the U.S. public opinion has traditionally been a bipartisan source of support for Israel, and that is beginning to change and fracture. And it is in that context that I think pro-Israeli groups and the US government as well have resorted to increasingly repressive measures to try to stamp out these protests and oppositions. I mean, you now have people literally being snatched off the street by plainclothes officers in masks and activists being whisked off to prison in maximum security prisons in Louisiana as a prelude to deporting them. There's a case of one student who escaped to Canada before she could be arrested, and so on. So really unprecedented stuff that, for example, you never saw during the Vietnam War or during the Iraq War. Very scary stuff, I would say, and I fear that it is going to get worse because of the very limited opposition to it, and people not realizing that it's going to go a lot further if universities don't stand up to the government. Then within Palestinian society, Palestine has been a polarized and divided political arena now for well over a decade, where a mini civil war was fought in 2007 between its two main components, Hamas and Fatah, which dominates the Palestinian Authority. Um, and so that has been ongoing, the schism. But at the same time, these demonstrations that you're referring to are a much more recent phenomenon, which are a direct response to the continuation of the war and the belief among some that if Hamas would relinquish its negotiating position and basically accept all the demands that are being made upon it by Israel, a belief that the war could then end and people could go back to having a normal life.